They deserve more.
They deserve more. Those 3 words, barely above a whisper, cut through the noise of breakfast plates and background chatter like a knife through silk. Xavier Langston stopped moving at that moment. The fork fell out of his hands. The coffee steamed and was left alone. Like a storm coming in from the south, a hush fell over Delilah's diner. No one had called him Xavier here. Nobody knew who he really was. He looked like just another down-on-his-luck guy passing through Savannah in his old work jacket and $10 boots. Xavier Langston, on the other hand, was not just anyone. He was the billionaire CEO who owned the diner where he was sitting, trying to figure out why the place was losing money so slowly. He thought he would find bad management, waste, and maybe some old recipes. He never thought he would find her. Zaria Monroe, 24, smart, pretty. A smile that lit up the cracked linoleum floors and an energy that somehow made the morning rush bearable. But she was a black woman. And in this place, people acted like she didn't exist because she was black. She wasn't treated like a valuable employee. People didn't treat her like a person. Xavier saw everything, the looks, the whispered insults, the way people talked to her like she was just a piece of furniture. But she still smiled, not because she was fine, but because she had learned how to live. That smile hid 100 little humiliations and 1,000 quiet heartaches. Until that morning, when she leaned down, looked the man in the eye, and said it. She didn't know he was her boss. They deserve more. This was no longer just about a business that wasn't doing well. It was about more than that. Systemic, people. A story based on black strength, resilience, and worth. This is the kind of black story that doesn't just want to be heard. It needs to be felt. And you're going to hear it. This is Hidden Worth, and if you've ever wondered what real value looks like, stay with us. Zaria Monroe didn't grow up wanting to wait tables, but people like her don't often have the luxury of choice. Zaria learned early on that she had to wear her dignity like armor, especially in rooms that didn't want to see her. Her grandmother raised her on the south side of Macon. "Smile, baby," her grandma used to say. "It's not a sign of weakness. That's resistance," Zaria said. Zaria had a hard time every day. She woke up before the sun rose, caught the 5:15 bus in the dark no matter what. We got to Delilah's diner right at 6 a.m. Tie your apron, pin on your name tag, and smile. She knew the customers weren't there to be nice. They came to get coffee, quick, cheap, and hot. But she gave them both anyway. Not because she was paid to, but because her grandma taught her to be graceful no matter who was watching. It wasn't simple. The rude comments about her attitude, the backhanded compliments on her looks, and the customers who called her girl like she didn't have a name. Dale, the manager, talked to her like she was a problem. How tips just seemed to vanish from her section. The time she heard a coworker copying her voice or rolling their eyes behind her back. She felt everything, but she didn't let any of it show. Zaria had dreams. She wanted to get her business management degree. She wanted to start her own cafe where everyone who came in would feel seen, heard, and respected. But dreams don't pay the bills. So for now, she made coffee, cleared plates, and remembered all of the regulars' orders by heart. What most people didn't see was how smart she was. She paid close attention to every little thing. The way she remembered allergies without being told. She saw that a customer was upset and quietly gave them an extra napkin or a kind word. She was kind for no reason. It was based on something. For real. That morning, when Xavier walked in with dirty boots and no shave, she treated him like she would have treated anyone else. With love, with respect. She thought that everyone should be treated with kindness and respect, even though no one had ever given it to her. She wasn't just talking about customers when she whispered those 3 words. She was talking about people who are like her. People who had a lot on their minds but still came. She did it with a smile. With power. Strong without saying a word. Xavier Langston didn't have to be there. Not really. His net worth was somewhere between 8 and 9 figures. He could have been on a yacht off the Amalfi Coast, drinking rare whiskey and talking to his CFO on the phone. But he was here instead. In Savannah. Sitting on a vinyl stool that makes a noise when you sit on it. A pair of jeans that someone else lent him, a windbreaker from a gas station, and a hoodie with a tear in the sleeve. He had gone undercover in one of his businesses before, but this was the first time it felt personal. His father had always wanted to open Delilah's Diner, a small town getaway from Wall Street stress. He put a lot of love into the place, but a sudden heart attack took him too soon. Xavier kept it open more because he missed it than because it was a good idea. It didn't make a lot of money. It hasn't been making much money lately. But when the quarterly reports showed a big drop in employee retention and customer ratings, Xavier knew something was wrong. Numbers are true, but they also never tell the whole truth. He wanted to look at the cracks more closely. He left the suit in New York then, grew a beard, went by the name Eli, made a reservation at a cheap motel off the highway, and went into his own diner as a nobody. He thought he would see laziness. Maybe he thought the service would be bad. But what he saw was a lot worse. It was not obvious, not loud. It was in the pauses between orders, the fake smiles, and how the black and brown staff were treated differently than the rest. The manager's voice tone, the way shifts are given out, who got yelled at, who was ignored. It was racist, not loud, not violent, but always there. 1,000 small insults lead to death. Then Zarya came. She moved like someone who was carrying heavy things but never letting them show. She made it look easy. She made people feel like they were there. Even he. He thought she was just good at her job at first. Then he saw how she acted after being made fun of, how she was nice to even the rude. He began to understand that his job wasn't just to save a company. It was about saving something that was human. He stayed longer than he had planned. He started watching more, paying attention, and the more he heard, the angrier he got. This went on until a whisper hit him hard. They should have better. It wasn't a complaint, it was a request. He also knew that his disguise wouldn't last much longer. Racism at Delilah's Diner didn't shout, it said something. It showed up in body language, backhanded compliments, and jokes that were just low enough to seem harmless. It wore the same uniform as everyone else, but it used silence and smirks to get its way. Xavier sat in the corner booth and watched as patterns began to show themselves. The white servers got the best shifts, like the busy Saturday mornings and lunch hours when they made the most money. Zarya and the other black workers had to do the closing, split shifts, and the never-ending scrubbing that no one else wanted to do. When things went wrong, they were the first to be blamed, and when things went right, they were the last to be thanked. Dale, the manager, said Zarya's name in a slow, drawn-out way that sounded like he was making fun of her. He said "sweetheart" to her in a way that showed he was in charge. But when Becky or Claire messed up, they just laughed it off. Girls will be girls. But when Zarya was 2 minutes late because the bus was late, Dale yelled, "You're lucky to have this job," so that everyone in the kitchen could hear. Customers weren't much better either. Chuck, a regular, always left $2 on the table, but wanted Zarya to refill his coffee 3 times before he paid. He once called her girl to her face and asked if she was legal. Xavier clenched his teeth so hard that he could feel his molars move. Zarya didn't move. She poured his coffee with a smile that was so sharp it could cut glass. Not just Zarya. Deshawn, the dishwasher, had been turned down for a raise 3 times, even though he had worked extra shifts when other people called in sick. Rosa, the cook, spoke English well, but people kept telling her to slow down or speak clearly. They weren't the only ones who were hurting. It was part of the system. It was a habit. It was a part of how the diner worked every day. Xavier had seen bias before at charity galas, real estate meetings, and boardrooms. But this was not the same. It was a close experience, over and over again, and it broke something inside of him. He wanted to be invisible so he could watch without being biased, but now he felt like he was part of it. In the end, every dollar this place made went to him. His name was on every slur that went unchallenged, every stolen tip, and every unfair write-up. He could no longer act like he didn't see it. There was more than just racism behind the counter. It was part of the culture. It was in the laughter that hid the truth. No one asked questions about the rules. In the silence of those who knew better but didn't do anything. What about Xavier Langston? He was done not doing anything. Zarya Monroe was aware of her place, not because she didn't believe in herself, but because the world around her had done it for her without asking or saying sorry. At Delilah's diner, she wasn't Zaria the college student, Zaria the businesswoman, or Zaria the woman who spoke 3 languages and read business books on her breaks. They thought of her as the help, someone to take orders, stay quiet, smile even when it hurt, and fade into the background when the real customers came in. She had to clean up messes she didn't make, both real and figurative. When another server spilled drinks on a table of tourists, Zaria was told to go fix it. When Becky came in late and hungover, Zaria was told to cover her section without question. When Dale got angry, it was always Zaria who had to deal with it. It was never Claire or the new girl with the nose ring. It was always Zaria. No one had written down the rules, but they were clear. Don't say anything, don't argue, don't expect things to be fair. There were 2 rooms for breaks. Of course, one was unofficial, but everyone knew. Zaria and the others ate lunch in the small back closet, which had a broken chair and a microwave that barely worked. That's where Zaria and the other people ate lunch. The booth by the window in the front, where the manager laughed with his best friends. You couldn't go there unless you were invited. And she was never asked to come. Zaria became the face of the place when the health inspector showed up. Dale pushed her to the front and smiled at her. He said, "Zaria knows everything around here," as if she were a mascot instead of a person. But when it was time to talk about raises or promotions, she was conveniently left out, not chosen. Again. She asked for 2 Saturdays off a month so she could go to her cousin's nursing school graduation and then help her grandmother after surgery. The request was turned down. Dale said, "We need you when we're busy." She understood the irony. They needed her, but they never respected her. Being second class wasn't about rules or laws. It was okay to be there, but never celebrated. It was about being visible when it was helpful and invisible when it wasn't. The way they talked to her said a lot. How they looked at her, the way they thought she should be thankful to be there. But Zaria wasn't meant to stay small. It wasn't weakness that made her take every insult, work every shift without complaining, and show every ounce of grace. It was food. That day, when she whispered those 3 words to a man she thought was just another lost soul, something inside her changed. She would rather not be accepted anymore. She wanted things to be different. Zaria didn't even blink when she served him the first time. Xavier walked in looking like someone the staff would normally ignore or, even worse, watch. His hoodie was wrinkled, his beard was messy, and he looked tired, like a man who had slept too many nights on a greyhound. Most of the people in the diner saw him as just another drifter. It's not worth hearing another story. But Zaria looked at him like he was important. She didn't think twice before giving him a menu. "Do you want coffee to start, dear?" She didn't sound sorry. It wasn't a lie either. It was hot, known. Like he wasn't just some random person at table 4, but someone who should be seen. "Sure," Xavier mumbled, not expecting it. People usually treated him like a king or a ghost. Not this, not a person. She came back with a chipped mug and poured with the same level of care that most people use when serving wine. She winked and said, "Cream and sugar are right there, unless you want it black and judgmental like my grandma." Xavier smiled for the first time that morning. Not one of the other servers even looked at him. Dale was already giving Zaria the side eye for wasting time, but she didn't hurry. She asked him if he needed a few more minutes, filled his water, and brought him extra napkins when she saw the tear in his sleeve. This wasn't giving away money, it was respect. And Xavier, who was still playing the part of Eli the Drifter, realized something scary. Zaria didn't know who he was, but she treated him better than most people did when he was wearing a $1,000 suit. He saw how other people talked to her. She gave a check to a teenage couple, but they didn't say thank you. An older man called her sweetie with a smile that made her feel bad. No one else saw her, but she kept moving with grace, like a jazz song playing over a lot of traffic, steady and unshaken. She brought him a plate of eggs over easy and wheat toast and pointed to the newspaper he was pretending to read. She said, "Today's headline won't feed you, but what it says might help." Xavier looked up. "Why are you being so nice to someone you don't know?" Zaria stopped, only for a second. "Because there are already too many people in the world who want to make others feel small. I'd rather be someone who doesn't." He looked at her and didn't say anything. At that moment, the idea that she was just a waitress fell apart completely. There was more to her than that. She was the life of the place. And maybe, just maybe, she was the reason he came in that day. Dale Thompson had been in charge of Delilah's diner for almost 9 years, and he acted like he owned it. Of course, he didn't. But that never stopped him from acting like the rules changed depending on how he felt, and his mood often changed a lot against people like Zaria. Dale was a good old boy to the regulars. He had a firm handshake, a friendly smile, and a quick wit. But when he got behind the kitchen doors, his charm turned cold. He ran the diner like a group of friends in high school. If you didn't look or talk like him, you were always on thin ice. Dale was not dumb. He didn't use bad words. He didn't scream. But what he did said a lot. He set up doubles for Zaria after she asked for fewer hours to study. Dale laughed it off when Claire, the newest white server, forgot the order for a whole table. Zaria was late by 5 minutes because the bus broke down, so he gave her a written warning. He held the paper like a trophy and said, "Policy's policy." Xavier saw everything. He saw how Dale micromanaged the black staff by always hovering, nitpicking, and fixing things that weren't wrong. The white staff, on the other hand, took it easy, barely covering their sections and checking their phones behind the counter. Dale pulled Zaria aside one afternoon. "Do you ever think about how to smile more?" he said, while taking a sip of his coffee. "Customers like to see friendly faces. Yours can be a little too much." Zaria blinked. "Every day, Dale, I smile." "Yes, but not the right kind of smile. You know what I'm talking about." She didn't say anything. She wasn't able to. It was clear what he wanted. It wasn't about the service. It was about giving in. Be kind. Stop talking. Be little. Dale blamed Deshawn for a customer leaving without paying another time, even though he was in the back doing dishes. Dale yelled, "You should have been watching the floor." Deshawn said, "Not my job." And the next week, his hours were cut. Xavier could feel his hands curling into fists under the table. His spreadsheets couldn't have shown him this. No audit, financial report, or consultant would have found it. The situation wasn't bad management. It was unfair treatment that looked like discipline. And what about Dale? He wasn't just not leading, he was actively hurting the culture. It wasn't just about bad reviews from customers or high turnover rates. Xavier got that now. If the core of a business was bad, it couldn't do well. What he saw in Dale wasn't leadership, it was ego, fear, a name tag with prejudice on it. That night, Xavier sat in his motel room and looked at the employee handbook he had signed off on years before. There were a lot of promises and values in it: fairness, respect, increase. And if someone like Dale was in charge of it, none of it mattered. On a Wednesday, it happened. It was a slow morning. The sun crept in lazily through the front windows, and the smell of burnt bacon stayed in the air longer than usual. Xavier sat in his usual booth, the second one from the back, and pretended to drink his lukewarm coffee. Zaria had been moving non-stop for 4 hours, filling cups, checking things, and dealing with rude customers with the same calm grace she always had. That day was already going wrong. She had turned down a white couple. The woman had whispered to Dale, "We'd rather have someone else." He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything to Zaria. He just nodded and moved the table. She had been smiling the whole time, but Xavier saw the small crack behind her eyes. Then Dale yelled at her for not getting more syrup for table 6. He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "How many times do I have to tell you? Listen up." Xavier almost got up. He wanted to take off the mask and shoot the man right away, but something inside him told him to wait. A few minutes later, Zaria came over to his table. Her tone was polite, and her posture was perfect. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked as she took his plate away. He nodded. She bent down a little to pick up the silverware and put it on the tray. It happened then. She stopped, looked him straight in the eye, really looked, and said in a calm, low voice, "They should have better." 3 words, soft, not showy. But they had the weight of generations on their shoulders. Xavier could feel it. Xavier could feel the weight of generations deep in his chest, not as a boss, not as a black man with power, but as a person who had seen too many people suffer in silence. She didn't want anyone to feel sorry for her. She wasn't even talking for herself. She was speaking for everyone who was like her. The people who were told to be quiet, to accept it, to be thankful for less. He wanted to say something, but she had already left. She moved to the next table, and her smile came back like armor. But something had changed. That whisper wasn't just a remark. It was a looking glass. It showed Xavier what kind of leader he had been. What kind of business had he let grow in his father's name? And what kind of future did he need to make if he really wanted to honor it? He had gone to Delilah's diner to find out what was going on. He found the truth instead. And truth whispers when the noise of the world is too loud. There wasn't a big speech or a news camera waiting outside for the reveal. There were no fireworks or clapping. It came on a quiet Thursday morning, just like the whisper that started it all. As usual, Zaria got there early. The diner was just getting up. When she went to clock in, she saw Dale standing by the register with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. Next to him was a man she didn't know at first. He was clean-shaven, had a new haircut, and wore a pressed navy suit. He also stood differently. He looked like he should be at a boardroom table instead of table 7 with yesterday's coffee. Then he smiled, and she couldn't breathe. "Zaria," he said softly. She frowned. Do you know me?" He took a breath. "You knew me as Eli. My name is Xavier Langston, though. This is my place." There was a moment of silence between them that lasted too long. She blinked, trying to figure out how the quiet drifter who asked for more napkins and the billionaire CEO who now looked like he had just come out of a Forbes magazine fit together. Dale's face went pale. "Mr. Langston, I didn't know you were coming back to town." Xavier didn't even glance at him. He kept looking at Zaria. He said, "I came here undercover because the numbers didn't make sense. But what I found, it wasn't just about the spreadsheets, it was about people, how they are being treated." Zaria's lips parted a little, still shocked. "So, you saw?" He nodded his head. "All of it." She finally felt seen for the first time since she started working at Delilah's. Not allowed, not tolerated. Looked at. Dale tried to speak, but Xavier held up a hand. He said firmly, "We'll talk later." He looked back at Zaria. "Those 3 words you said in a whisper, they've been in my head ever since. You were correct. They do deserve more. And that starts right now." Zaria didn't know what to say. No one had ever really listened to her before. She had been silent for so long that she almost forgot what it was like to matter. Xavier smiled. "Come with me." They went outside into the cool light of the morning. He talked to her about his dad, about the dream that Delilah had once, and what it needed to change into now. Something new, something just. He said, "You've been holding this place together with grace and grit. And if you're okay with it, I need your help to put it back together." Zaria looked up at him, and her eyes were no longer guarded. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more." And at that moment, things changed again. Eli was gone. Eli was no longer hidden. Only Xavier and Zaria. 2 people, 2 paths, 1 goal. Things were about to change. By Friday morning, the diner was buzzing with rumors that spread faster than the smell of fresh biscuits. There was something going on. A big thing, and no one could ignore it any longer. Xavier Langston had come back, but this time, he was the owner, not Eli the drifter, and he wasn't shy about it. Before the doors opened to the public, he met with the staff behind closed doors. No pictures, no press, just the truth. He stood in the middle of the room, wearing a sharp suit and looking straight ahead. Then he said something that no one expected. "I've seen how things really work here, and I'm not happy with how this place has changed." Zaria stood next to him. Dale didn't. The room got quiet. Becky even looked up from her phone. Xavier went on. "Fairness, respect, chance. These aren't just words on a poster. They are the least you can do. And from now on, that minimum is going up." That's when things changed. Deshawn, who had never spoken above a mumble in meetings, stepped up. "Does that mean we won't get our hours cut anymore for speaking up?" "Yes," Xavier said. "From now on, no payback. Ever." Rosa folded her arms. How about management? The way Dale talks to us? Xavier didn't move. Dale is no longer responsible for his duties. Starting now. The quiet was broken by gasps. Claire's mouth fell open. "Oh my God," Becky said, under her breath. Dale, who was red in the face, tried to leave without saying anything, but Xavier turned to him. "You can pick up your last check next week. HR will get in touch." There wasn't any chaos. It was one of the releases. It was like a dam that had been waiting too long to break finally gave way. The workers, many of whom had worked at Delilah's for years without getting a thank you, suddenly stood taller. But the revolt wasn't just about getting rid of one person. It was about changing the way people live. Zarya was made the temporary operations manager and given the power to look over schedules, tips, and workplace rules. The staff would have a say. People would hear voices. Xavier said, "You all make this place what it is. From now on, how many hours you work won't be the only thing that matters. It will be based on how we help each other." At Delilah's, it was the first time anyone had really felt powerful. And there were no strikes or yelling. It came with the truth, with responsibility, with a promise that what had been allowed would no longer be. The uprising wasn't loud, it was right. And it began with a whisper. Zarya didn't wear her apron for the first time since she started working at Delilah's diner. She stood behind the counter in a neat blazer and black pants. Her name was written in gold on a small badge that said, "Manager." Her curls were neatly pulled back, and her eyes were sharp, calm, and focused. It wasn't about how you looked. It was about taking charge. Xavier made this announcement official on Monday morning, right as the regulars were settling into their usual seats. He stood at the front of the diner with Zarya next to him. At that moment, she was not his assistant or employee, but his equal. Xavier said, "This diner has always had heart. But heart doesn't mean anything if you don't have someone to protect it. Someone who knows the people, the work, and the problems. That person is Zarya Monroe." The clapping started slowly, then got louder. First Deshawn, then Rosa, and finally a few surprised customers joined in. Claire clapped as well, her eyes wide but respectful. Becky blinked and then quietly joined in. There was no speech from Zarya. There was no need for her to. It was enough that she was there. Xavier gave her the keys to the office, the registers, and the safe, and then he whispered, "This place is yours to shape." She said back, "Let's make something better." The first changes she made weren't big. They were done on purpose. She made a schedule that changed every week so that everyone got fair hours and time off. She put in place boxes for anonymous feedback. She hired a local diversity consultant to run workshops, and they were paid for all of their hours. Tips were shared and given out based on how many hours worked and how well people did their jobs, not who they liked best. The energy changed quickly. Customers also started to notice. Not only was the service different, but the smiles were too. Now they showed pride instead of obligation. Zarya walked around the room with ease, checking in on tables, encouraging her staff, and dealing with stress before it turned into a fight. What about Xavier? He took a step back. Not because he didn't care, but because he finally understood what real leadership was. It wasn't about being in charge. It was faith. He came by a lot, but not as a boss, as a friend. And every time he came in, Zarya didn't bow down to him. She respected him. Both earned. The diner started making money again, not because of advertising, but because it had meaning. People came back not only for the pancakes but also for the warmth. I thought this small area in Savannah had changed. That they might be able to as well. Zarya used to be just a waitress. Now, she was the heart of Delilah's. And everyone, especially Xavier, knew she was just getting started. Zarya never tried to get attention. She didn't talk to be heard. She talked when it was important. Maybe that's why Xavier Langston remembered what she said longer than any business report ever did. They deserve better. That whisper started a chain reaction that changed not only the people inside Delilah's diner, but also the mind of a billionaire who thought he knew what leadership looked like. This wasn't just a story about racism or getting better. It was a story about value. We've been taught that numbers have something to do with worth at some point. The story is about two different job titles. We believe this even when it comes to our bank accounts. At a gala, who you shake hands with is important. But Zaria's story showed that it wasn't true. Worth can be quiet. It shows up early. It stays late. It checks on other people before it checks on itself. Value doesn't need applause. It just needs to be seen. Zaria was never less than first class. That was just how the world treated her. Until someone finally noticed. It wasn't until the man who could make a difference came out from behind the spreadsheets and started to really listen. She told us that big actions don't lead to real change. It comes from doing brave things. She stressed how important it is to smile even when things are hard. A nice word to a stranger. A refusal to be anything less than whole. New branding or fancy renovations didn't make Delilah's diner a success. It did well because people like Zaria were given the chance to grow and the respect to lead. So if you've ever been ignored, worked twice as hard for half the recognition, or kept your mouth shut just to get through the day, this story should remind you that your worth was never in doubt. The world might not see it, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. And if you can help someone, like by noticing the invisible, amplifying the unheard, or rewarding the strong, do it. This shouldn't be done out of kindness. Because it's fair. There are a lot of people like Zaria. There are a lot of them. They are bringing you coffee, cleaning your office, and holding your community together with invisible threads. They should get more. We all do. This is hidden worth. And if this story touched you, please pass it on. Someone out there would benefit from hearing it today.